Morning, Tara.
Morning, Chris.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
What we're going to start doing is at the end of each quarter, we might get together and give a little summary of what's happened in the marketplace. But I don't expect, Tara, we're ever going to have a quarter like the one we've just had.
It's been a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah, it has been a wild ride. I think in my 4 decades or more now in the real estate business, and many of those decades in this part of the world, I've never actually seen a period like the last 3 months. What do you think we learned about the practice and the profession of being a real estate professional during the last few months? What are the lessons that came out of it for us and our team?
I think, again, just how big of a deal it is to buy and sell a property. I think anyone that had their property for sale during a pandemic learnt a lot as well, and anyone that was buying a property through the pandemic learnt a lot. So what I've learnt, I guess, about our profession is that so much of what we do is remaining calm and keeping people totally on track and being that voice of reason when the media and the world might be telling them something otherwise. I think we're pretty lucky in this area as well, in that people still want to move here. So regardless of what's going on in the world, it's still a place that people want to come to. And every property is so different and unique, and that as a buyer, if you find one that you really love, that desire to want to move here and to not have to keep looking for another 6 to 12 months for the right property overrides what might be going on out there. But for us, I think it was just that remaining calm and being, getting confident and with uncertainty, getting, comfortable with the uncertainty of the future. I think that was a big transition for many people, in that the freak out was around, we don't know what the future holds and we don't have control over that. But getting comfortable with uncertainty was a huge tipping point, I think, for us, for our business as well.
The sellers and the people who trusted us with their homes were in need of what specifically? You mentioned our calm approach. I agree with you there. What else did people selling properties in the last few months particularly need from their real estate agent?
Well, I think they needed an adaptive real estate agent, and that's what we quickly became. They needed to know that we've got this and that we are adapting in every way possible. And that's the thing I think I'm most proud of with our team, was that there isn't anything or any length that we wouldn't have gone to make sure that that service was provided to the buyer and the seller throughout that campaign during COVID, to make sure that everyone felt comfortable. And that's how we achieved, great off-market sales in excess of 2 million and, sight unseen sales. So I think what they needed was to know that we weren't falling off the wagon with the rest of the world, and that we were remaining calm and that we were adaptive and that we had a plan. The sellers needed a plan most of all throughout that, and that's certainly what we had. And again, we were hitting the ground running with this as well. We didn't know what the future was or anything, but what we are is great problem solvers, and that's probably something that I learnt most, is that on a daily basis we problem solve for a living, and there's no problem too big that we aren't good at workshopping and problem solving. So a pandemic comes along, we use the skills that we have to make sure that we were continue to look after those clients, and the result of that was some sales and more than what we had anticipated, which was great. But also for the buyers, they're listening to so many different things out there in the media, and they're freaking out and not knowing what the future holds as well. But to keep them on track as well, and that, I guess as a buyer during that time, it in a lot of ways it was a good time to buy a property. So
as a sales manager of a large team here at First National, were you personally surprised with the resilience of the local real estate market?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I was going home not knowing what the days ahead were going to hold, for sure. But again, you get those little wins. It's like anything in life, you know, you get a little win here and there, whether it be a sale or, you know, multiple interest on a property during a pandemic, and it just gives you that bit of strength and that bit of confidence and bit of resilience that you need to keep pushing through. And you know, that, you know, compounding with a lot of good sales, like, you know, 20 plus sales a month during a pandemic. I didn't, you know, we spoke about it and we talked about, you know, what we could achieve during that time, and we exceeded it. So I was blown away. And if I go back and look at the case studies of each sale, most of the buyers that have brought during this last few months have been buyers that are moving to this area from somewhere else, because it's been a safe place for people to retreat to during difficult times. So probably more out-of-town sales in that time, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Historically, in our world here, about 2/3 of the sales, and this goes back 25 years, but about 2/3 of the sales we make are to people who live in the Northern Rivers. And then of that third, very few are from overseas buyers. Half of that third are from Sydney, and then they break up into the other capital cities. Melbourne's decreased in the last 5 or 6 years, but during the pandemic, people from Melbourne and people from Sydney and people from places outside the Northern Rivers stood up. Why and for what reasons did those people come here and buy property, sometimes, as you mentioned, sight unseen? What was it about our part of the world, our beautiful part of the world, that convinced them to buy here?
Well, a lot of them weren't planning to buy during, not just because of the pandemic, but most of them had plans to do it one day. However, I guess this whole last 3 months, people have assessed a lot of things in their lives, and one of them being where they currently live and if that's what they want for the rest of their life. So most of them were bringing their plans forward and going, well, you know, I'm not going to wait around here now for whether it be, you know, my job. I can now work from anywhere. Technology has enabled everyone to work remotely. So a lot of those people have just decided to either continue working for their current employers and move up here, you know, run their business from here, or some have just opted for a complete life change and they've let go of that city life and sacrifices that they weren't willing to make before. They're now willing to make to have the life that they want, and maybe being inside in the city helped them realize that they wanted to do it sooner rather than later. So also overseas, you know, like the amount of overseas interests that we've had from expats, or, you know, people with a partner who's got a job, you know, overseas but is Australian. A lot of interest from there as well. So, you know, we know what it was like in Australia during a pandemic, but I'm sure it was different in other parts of the world. And those people are wanting to secure a piece of heaven here, and bring it forward, and things that they might have been talking about at dinner parties as their dream one day to buy a house in Byron. They've just gone, stuff it, we're just going to do it. So, yeah.
As we move forward, and people watching this and listening to this might find what we're about to talk about now strange, but we've actually been able to move quite a lot of property in the last few months, and we are therefore looking for property because in some segments or parts of the market, we've now got a lack of property.
Absolutely, yeah. Like we were talking about it in our sales meeting this morning about an owner's mentality around spring being the best time to sell. Well, I always look at it that's about supply and demand, and right now the supply is so low. It's so low and the demand is there, and this is creating a good market for us right now. So I think for anyone that is looking to sell, you should always, aside from what's happening in the economy, you always look at the supply and demand. So I've never seen the stock levels this low. We talked about it this morning. There's probably 30 to 40% less properties available online than what there was 6 months ago. And that in itself, you know, buyers are frustrated. They're feeling like there's not a lot available, and you know, that makes for a perfect storm if you're a seller with a property right now.
One last thing, Tara, I think people are always interested in the future. How's the market? What's the market going to do? It's a question I've been asked for decades. if you were looking into the future in the next quarter as we come up to the end of the financial year, what do you think the spring is going to look like in this part of the world in the property sector?
I think it's going to look really good because I personally know there's a lot of buyers out there in the marketplace that we're talking to on a daily basis. For me in my business as well, there's a lot of people out there that are looking for property. The number of inquiries that we're getting, and I just know that the current level of stock that's available is not going to satisfy the amount of inquiries that's coming in. So I think what we'll see and what I hope to see would be a very consistent market over the coming months, and that's for this area in the Northern Rivers, because it is quite unique, as we all know. So
thanks for spending time with us this
thank
morning,
you.
Tara.
Thanks, guys.